So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the February edition of the SIGUCCS webinar series. My name is Kevin Chapman, and I'll be playing MC this morning. And I'm here with Beth Lynn Nolen, who will be giving the feature presentation of how to create effective online posters. But before we get to the feature presentation, I do have a few announcements to make, so let's get started with those. First of all, on the busy SIGUCCS calendar, the next upcoming event is actually an unconference or Zoom hangout, basically an informal gathering through Zoom when we get together and chat and stuff. This topic around we are somewhat tongue-in-cheek referring to as March 362nd, 2020, and the conversation will be reflecting on what the last year has brought us and where it's brought us, courtesy of our old friend COVID. And that's taking place on February 25th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And then following that, of course, we have the biggie, the ACM SIGUCCS 2021 annual conference, which begins on March 14th in a browser near you. The whole conference is online this year, spanning 6 weeks with various events over the course of those weeks. But we actually cheat a little bit by starting the week before that with our pre-conference workshops. Both Trevor Murphy and Tom Wilk will be presenting, or hosting, I should say, workshops on March 10th. Trevor will start that at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And then on March 11th, Tom will be starting at noon Eastern Time. So if you're interested in attending either of those pre-conference workshops, please do hit the SIGUCCS website and register for those. Kicking off this, the conference this year, we have our keynote speakers, and at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time on March 15th, we have Margaret Burnett and Susan Svacek will be presenting one after each other in the same session to set the tone for our conference. And that leads straight into our seminar series. Now this year, because everything's happening online, what we have done is we have grouped sessions together under a specific topic so that each event will feature multiple presenters and multiple sessions. The sessions will be pre-recorded, but the presenters themselves will be in attendance so they can answer questions over the course of the presentation. And you can see the list of topics here presented. And again, those are scattered throughout the 6-week period of the conference to try to break things up and give people the chance to attend as many as possible. Recognizing that SIGUCCS is as much about the social networking as it is about some of the actual formal presentations, we have also a number of social events over the course of the conference, starting with a welcome reception on the opening day. We'll have things like an online game night, book club will take place during the conference. We'll be celebrating spring birthdays and various other things as well. So again, please do take a look at the SIGUCCS schedule and sign up for any one of those social events or all of the social events that may be of interest to you. Talking of our book club, if you're interested in reading with us, the March book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. There will be discussion in the book club Slack channel, and there's actually an online meeting scheduled, as I mentioned, during the conference itself. That is set for March 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And if, like me, you're a slow reader and that March deadline seems just a little bit too soon, you may want to consider joining us for the May book, which is going to be The Unicorn Project, a novel about developers, digital disruption, and thriving in the age of data by Gene Kim. More details on that particular book to follow. If you just want to keep up with what's going on in SIGUCCS, there's various ways you can do that. We have an email listserv, which is a great place to ask questions, or if you're anything like me, just watch the questions being asked and enjoy the answers flowing through from various experts and peers across the country, across the world, really. We also have a presence on Facebook and Twitter, but easily the most active place, I think, is our Slack channels. There's a lot of activity there. There's a lot of toing and froing, both formal and informal. Some of the most popular channels are, of course, the book club channel, conversation around the conference itself. There's an entire channel dedicated to productivity, and then the ever popular weekly challenge. So yeah, if you're interested in getting a taste of SIGUCCS and what we're like on a day-to-day basis, you might want to jump on some of the Slack channels and see what's going on there. And then, of course, if you like what you see and you're not already a member, please do consider joining SIGUCCS. There's none of the communication channels I mentioned previously require membership, but there are some benefits such as conference discounts, access to the entire ACM digital library, which is not a small thing, and then the SIGUCCS mentoring program, which I myself joined this year. You can also participate in the elections of the folks running it, and that way you also get to give them a hard time when and if you feel like it. I think that wraps it up for the announcements. So before I head over, just a couple of reminders here about the webinar itself. Everyone is muted. The session is being recorded, so if you miss a detail, keep your eye on the YouTube channel next week when we post a link there. It'll also be, of course, on the SIGUCCS website itself under the webinar section. We're going to ask that you hold questions until the end, or if you want to, you can actually either post them in the questions section of the interface or the chat window, and then when Beth is finished with her presentation, we will do a kind of Q&A session at the end. If there's a really, really desperate need, if there's a technical problem or something like that, you can raise your hand and we'll try and pay attention to that. But I'll be honest, I'll be mostly focusing on the questions and the chat window. And with that, I think I'm going to change the presenter here so that Beth gets to do her thing. Beth, I believe you are now it. Perfect. Oh, you are still muted, it looks like. Hold on a second here.
Okay, now I'm unmutable. There we go.
Sorry
I was going to say, it kept saying, you are muted by yourself and by the presenter. And then I said, but I'm trying to unmute myself.
Didn't want you to talk.
It's okay. It's okay. Let me just do some quick rearranging down here on my second screen, so that way GoToWebinar's webcam view doesn't take up the entirety of my second screen as it is attempting to do, because it is being ever so helpful. And I will get into today's presentations. So welcome everybody to a very special session of creating an effective online poster. My name is Beth Lynn Nolen, and I work with Indiana University's IT training group out of Indiana University, Bloomington. And today I'm going to be walking you through how to create an effective online poster, not just as a research poster for any sort of research poster presentation, but also with some hints specifically for the SIGUCCS conference's poster session that we've got coming up as part of our virtual conference. So let's get started. So in today's session, I'm going to be covering the following. I'll be covering an introduction to research posters or online presentation posters. There's a lot of references to research posters specifically in this slideshow, as it's my usual slideshow for our creating online research posters presentation. But anything that says research also you can swap out presentation, and it'll work just fine, whether you're presenting just information that you would be sharing at a conference, or if it's research that you've put together that you want to share otherwise. So we'll be having an introduction to our presentation posters. We'll talk about some design principles for effective posters. I'll also talk about some tips for designing your poster, including some special considerations for digital research posters, so posters you'll be presenting as part of an online poster session or online conference, and how to get started building your poster in popular design programs. We may not have time to jump into some of these popular design programs today, but I do have an online course available that I will link at the end. I'll share the link to at the end of the session that gives you instructions on how to start building your research poster in InDesign, Illustrator, and PowerPoint. So I'm going to go out, and finally, last but certainly not least, exporting your completed poster so you can share it with others and present it. Now, as we mentioned previously, if you've got any questions, please feel free to add them in the question and answer tool or to place them in the chat. I will be answering questions at the end of today's session, just so that way we can keep things moving along. But I'm happy to have any questions that you might have. Please feel free to ask them. There are no silly questions when it comes to research poster creation. And as I mentioned previously, everything I'm covering today is included in an online course hosted by IT Training that is free for everybody. It's called Creating Research Posters, and it goes into even more depth than what I'll be able to go into today on how to create a poster. So if you missed something or want some more detail on something, we've got that all in an online course that's available for everyone. So now I'm going to jump into introducing research posters. I'm going to go through this section briefly because chances are you may have already presented posters at a conference, or you've got an idea of what a research poster is. But with our research posters, they're one of many ways to present information, not just about research, but just any type of presentation. You can turn that into a poster if you want to. Posters can be made for both print and digital poster sessions, which is the latter is what I will be focusing on today. I will point out though that when putting together a poster, if you're putting it together for a digital presentation, you may still want to think about, what if I'm going to print this later on? So I'll talk about that a little later on in today's session when we get to actually just talking about how to build your poster. So, but posters can be made for both print and digital poster sessions. There are many ways of displaying posters, whether it's through Zoom or tacked to some foam core board in a big large room where everybody can wander around and talk to you about your poster. So whatever you're designing your poster for, whether it's for the poster session for the upcoming SIGUCCS conference or a research poster that might be displaying some information in an academic department, there are two very important things to keep in mind as you design, no matter what you're creating your poster for. The first thing is your audience, or who's going to be reading the information in your poster. So depending on where you're presenting this, that audience is going to change. For example, I would design a poster very differently if I was presenting for, say, Indiana University statewide IT conference than I would design for a poster session for the SIGUCCS conference. The statewide IT conference can be a little bit more formal at times, while the SIGUCCS conference, I have come and presented posters with a Star Trek theme in them while I'm talking about topics in higher ed IT. So knowing your audience can be really helpful. You also want to know your message, what you're trying to communicate to your audience. So this can be some research that you've worked on. This can be a big project that you want to present about. Whatever your message is, you'll want to know that and know your audience ahead of time, because these two things are going to inform many of the design decisions you make as you create your poster, from the colors you use, the fonts you use, how you lay things out, even the overall tone and theme of your poster. So knowing your audience and your message ahead of time is going to be very helpful as you design your poster. Now, what can a poster contain? What can a presentation poster contain? Well, it contains text and images that help tell the story of your research or the project that you're presenting on. And your text can include a title that introduces your poster, an introduction to what you're talking about. This list here focuses more on academic research posters, but we may still be talking about a problem we were aiming to solve with a specific project. We may be talking about the results of this project, anything that we might want to study further or explore further, and our conclusion, wrapping everything together. Images that you might want to include graphs, photos, and other illustrations that, again, help tell the story of your project or your research or what you're trying to communicate to your audience. Now that you know to focus on your audience and your message, and now that you have an idea of what your poster should contain, how do you get started? Well, here are 4 steps that will help you start your poster creation process. First off is familiarizing yourself with basic design principles, and that's going to be the bulk of today's presentation. Next is gathering text and images that you'll be using in your poster. Your text is likely going to be an expanded abstract. We'll talk about this a little further when we get to the text part of creating our posters. But the text, you may already have that, whether it's some text that you might be pulling from the paper that you've created to accompany your poster, or a research paper that you've written to go along with that your poster will be accompanying. Your images, as I've mentioned, anything that's going to help tell the story of your poster. Third, you'll want to sketch out a rough draft of your poster, and I actually mean literally sketch that out. Get a sheet of paper and a pencil, grab a whiteboard and some markers, and once you have your text and your images, you want to sketch out a rough layout of where you think things are going to land on your page, where your title is going to be, where specific images might be. You don't have to be a great artist to do this. If you've got your graphics, for example, you can say, all right, I'm going to just write the name of what's going to be here. So this is going to be graph about survey results or photo of computer lab. Just write it in there where you're sketching out where things are landing. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it all out there that you can then use, and you can use that as a roadmap when you do build your poster. And that's the final step of the process. Once you've familiarized yourself with design principles, once you've got your text and your images that you're including and have that rough map of your poster, then you can build your poster in your design program of choice. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about these design principles that you can use to make an effective and engaging poster. And these principles are pulled together from these are a collection of design principles pulled from 2 design books that I've used in IT Training's Page Design and Layout Basics course. Roger C. Parker's Looking Good in Print and Robin Williams' The Non-Designer's Design Book. These principles can help you out as you approach the process of laying out your poster. And I've put them into 4 different categories that'll help make things a little bit easier as we approach the process of poster design. First off, we've got the category of focus. Get people to focus on your poster using the principles of contrast and repetition. Next, make sure you're organizing your content logically using the principles of direction and proximity. Next, exercising restraint when designing your poster and avoiding overwhelming readers with too much content on your page. This is especially important when we're designing for a digital presentation because we don't know what size screen people will be viewing our presentation on. And if there's a lot of information on our poster, it might be hard for people to focus on anything in specifics or be able to read the content. And last, but certainly not least, we also want to make sure we're paying attention to detail, specifically with our text details, images, and alignment. So I'm going to go into detail in each of these 4 groups right now. And we'll start off with focus. Now, the focus of this section, has us thinking about grabbing our readers' attention and making the important parts of our poster stand out so you can get your message across to your audience. And there are a couple of ways we can do this by making use of the design principles of contrast and proportion. Now, proportion means making use of size to convey importance, with our more important items being larger and the less important items being a little bit smaller. So, for example, this poster up here is actually one that, in the image you can see here, is one that I have actually presented at a SIGUCCS conference a couple of years ago. And if we take a look at this example, we can see the biggest, most eye-catching thing at the top of the page is the title of our poster and the subtitle of the poster. The next largest thing is the subheadings that indicate what this specific section is going to talk about, and they catch our eye. They bring us through that poster. And also, if you take a look at the last paragraph here, this last section, I also use some contrast in the form of bright colored text that's different than the other text that I have surrounding it. That's the example of contrast in use to help catch our reader's eye, draw their attention to specific parts of our page. So contrast, have important items stand out in some way, and proportion goes hand in hand with contrast by having your most important items stand out in size. So make them bigger than everything else. Next, in fact, actually, I started talking a little bit about, So one of the ways we can use proportion and contrast in our posters is by using different text sizes for different text elements. So right here, I have just an example of different text sizes that you might want to use for different elements of your poster. Your title, as I mentioned previously, is going to be your largest text on your page, then your subtitle, the next largest, and so on and so on. So, these can be helpful guidelines as you're designing your own posters, especially when you want to add proportion to different items to help catch readers' eyes. Next, when we're talking about proportion and contrast, you'll want to increase contrast with different colors, font types, and different sizes of items on the page. If I take a look at the small example I have up here on the screen, I have a little bit of color incorporated for contrast for the subheadings of our sections that this poster was taken from. We have different font types. We have our subheadings that are in our smaller subheadings that are in a sans serif font, and then our body text that is in a serif font. So that also helps add a little bit more contrast between the different elements on our page. And we also have some color behind a quote that's been pulled from a poster. Unfortunately, this was trimmed off, but you can see here, we've got color adding some contrast to help that quote stand out as well. So that's something those are just a couple of ways you can incorporate the principles of proportion and contrast into your poster. Next, I'm going to talk about organization, or how you are putting together your poster. Now, as I've mentioned, direction and proximity are the principles that we'll be thinking about with organization. Direction and proximity are going to help us out as we lay out the different pieces of information on our poster. Direction means laying out the information in a logical manner, leading the readers through our page in a way that makes sense. And so I'm going to click through here, and the arrows that I have here are showing the direction that we're leading our reader through our page. So we start out with the introduction, pull down to materials and methods, go through the results section. And as we're looking at this page, there are eye-catching elements that act as visual stepping stones that pull our eye through the page. The subheadings at the beginning of each section, the images that are included in each section, they're pulling us through our content and pulling our readers through the content all the way through our entire poster. And so if you look closely at the section headings, the way everything is organized on this page leads our reader through the poster in a way that makes sense. It's telling a story in a specific order that makes it sense instead of skipping around our content. Additionally, when we're thinking about proximity, that refers to grouping our related items together on the page to help everything make sense. For example, if we're referring to a specific data set in our poster text and have a graph that details that data, we want to make sure that put that graph near the section of our information that is explaining that data. If we had our results graph maybe over here, people might think, okay, this graph has something to do with the conclusions we're drawing, and then would be confused a little bit as they say, well, wait, as I'm reading through this, I don't see anything that's referring to this graph. So what's going on here? So again, keeping your related items together will help make things make more sense. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about restraint. This poster is an example that could use a little bit of restraint, I might think. This is an example from Colin Purrington's Research Posters website. Now, exercising restraint when putting together your research poster is extremely important, especially when you're building a poster for online viewing. You want to make sure your audience isn't distracted by having too many eye-catching items on the screen, on your poster. Now, as I've said, this is a somewhat extreme example of a lack of restraint. You can see that each section of the content has a different background color. There are a couple of different fonts in use. There are some drop shadows and images that I'm not sure if they make I'm not sure if they really entirely relate to things here. But so we want to make sure that when we're choosing items for our poster that they make sense with our content, and that also when we're building our poster, we're exercising restraint in some way. And so when we're talking about exercising restraint, we want to focus on two things: brevity and discernment. So with brevity, we want to keep our text brief. Keep your total word count between 600 to 800 words. And I'm suggesting with digital posters that you'll be sharing on a screen, fewer words is better. I'd stay more towards the 600 words level of the 600 word count there. Now, if you want to go into more depth about what you're presenting on, consider including a link to your poster paper in the ACM digital library, or a link to whatever research paper that you are sharing along with your poster. That way people can get more information if they want to learn more about the content that is in, or they want more detail on what you're presenting in your poster, without being overwhelmed by it when they first look at your poster. Now, additionally, when thinking about discernment, we want to think about how many fonts we're using, what colors we're using, and how we're putting things together on our page. So first off, limiting our font choices to only 2 fonts will help a little bit with exercising restraint. So that doesn't mean you can't use all of the different faces of a specific font. So my suggestions are typically to use a sans serif font for your headings and your subheadings, and then a serif font for your body text. I'll talk more about those 2 different font distinguishments later on, but having those 2 font choices will give you enough contrast to help different elements stand out, and also you can still add emphasis or catch readers' attention by using the different styles of that font. You can use bold, you can use italic, you can use, for example, Arial has Arial bold, Arial italic, Arial black. There's one font that I've used as one of Indiana University's brand fonts that I want to say just this one of the brand fonts has 16 different styles to it with just the Benton Sans font. So you can have a wide variety of different styles for the one specific font you might be using in your presentation. You'll also want to stick with a limited color palette as well, 2 to 3 colors at most. And that way we can have color in our presentation, but not so much color that it gets distracting. And then a smaller color palette will help unify things a little bit better and bring your poster's contents, help make things feel a little bit more cohesive. And when we're thinking about a background for our poster, I'm going to talk about 2 specific things here. Avoid using a dark colored or visually busy background for your poster, and avoid gradient backgrounds, specifically if you're printing it. But in general, gradient backgrounds don't always play nicely, either whether it is something you are printing or whether it is something that's being displayed on a screen. But back to the visually busy or dark backgrounds, we want to make sure that we have enough contrast between our text on our page and the background. We want to be able to read the text. And darker backgrounds with lighter text, well, it does have, sometimes if you're choosing the right colors, there may be enough contrast. If you're using a photo as a background, it's going to be nearly impossible. Even if you make that photo if you make that less opaque, more transparent, make it lighter so you can see the text over it, it's still going to be very hard to read text over an image background. So I would say avoid using a visually busy background or a dark background unless you are making sure you have appropriate contrast between your text and your background. And with gradient backgrounds, one of the problems with gradient backgrounds for research posters, especially when they're printed, is that depending on the quality of the printer you're using, there may be some banding in the background. What I mean when I say banding, as each color is printed, it almost looks kind of like stripes because the gradients don't always necessarily blend nicely together in your poster as it's printing out. It may look great on your screen, but when it's printing, excuse me, when it's printing, the quality of that, depending on the quality of the printer, depending on just how that printer handles gradients, it may not come out looking as nicely as you think it might. So keep that in mind as well. So next, I'm going to focus on paying attention to detail. And as I mentioned previously, there are 3 areas to focus on when it comes to attention to detail: text, images, and alignment. Now, attention to detail is what's going to make the difference between an amateur-looking poster and a poster that has a more professional look and feel. Now, let's talk about first our text details. Now, first off, poster titles should be in sentence case when you're building your poster. That way, that's when we are building our posters. It's one of the conventions that we follow when building our research posters. Additionally, this will also help any special terminology that's typically capitalized stand out in your poster title. Next, when we're making when we want to emphasize some of our text, we can use italics, bold, or color to emphasize our text to help it stand out from its surroundings. Now, underlines, I would avoid using underlines because underlines are typically associated with hyperlinks, and if we have underlined text in our digital research posters, people are going to think maybe that's a clickable link, and when they click on it and it doesn't go anywhere, they might be a little confused or say, oh, this might be broken. So I would avoid using underlined text unless it is for a hyperlink. But bold, italic, and color can help emphasize text in your poster. Next, as I mentioned previously, you'll also want to use body text. For your body text, it should be in a serif font, while your headings should be in sans serif. Why am I suggesting this? Well, when you're putting together your poster, for ease of reading, serif fonts are actually easier to read when you are reading smaller text. You'll notice that chances are any book that you have opened recently, if you look at the font, it's in a serif font. Let me bring up my font examples here. So when we talk about serif versus sans serif, you'll notice the serif font has these little flags on the ends of the pieces of each letter. And these serifs, these little flags, help make it easier for our eyes to determine what letters are what letters as we're reading, especially when it comes to smaller text. So chances are any book that you've opened recently makes use of serif font. Now, sans serif doesn't have these flags on the ends of the strokes of each letter. Sans serif font is a little bit easier to read when it's larger. So for example, as a heading or a subhead text font. Additionally, using one style for your body text and another for your headings is going to add that contrast that I mentioned previously and help make different parts of your poster stand out from each other. So next, I'm going to go ahead and talk about our image details. Images are another area you want to pay special attention to. Now, when you're including images in your poster, you want to make sure that they're going to be high quality images with a high resolution to ensure that they look their best. When I talk about resolution, I'm referring to how many spots of color, whether it is a pixel on our screen or a dot of ink on a paper, how many individual spots of color there are per linear inch of surface. If we have a higher amount of these spots of color per linear inch, our eyes will resolve all these spots of color into a clear image. If there are fewer of these spots of color, if we are printing out an image, it's going to look grainy. And if we have a small resolution image that we blow up so it's larger, it's going to look blurry, like the low resolution image I have over here on the right. We want to make sure that our images are high quality and make sure that they look their best when we are assembling our poster. Now you might think, okay, well, if I'm putting this together for screen, I don't necessarily need to worry about having high resolution images, right? Screens can only display a resolution of their screen resolutions is either 72 pixels per inch or 96 pixels per inch. Why do I need to worry? Well, if you are planning on printing your poster at any point in the future, if you think, hey, this is a great poster, maybe I'll present this at another conference. Maybe I want to have a copy of it to hang in my office. If you are working with lower resolution images, such as 72 dots per inch or pixels per inch, and then print it out on a large format printer, it's not going to look great. So my suggestion for images that you use in your poster, they should have a resolution of at least 150 pixels per inch or dots per inch when you are putting together your poster. And so you can actually check this in Photoshop using the image size dialog box. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, you can go to the image menu, then click on image size and look for the resolution field. This will tell you what the resolution of your image is. If it's lower than 150, you can make some changes here, but only if the print size of your image is large enough. Like the example I have up here on the screen, the resolution is 72 pixels per inch, but when it's printed, it's going to be 56 inches wide by 42 inches tall. So it's going to be a very large, very grainy picture. I could bump up the resolution, and if I am telling Photoshop, do not resample this image, and resample means Photoshop will either throw away data it doesn't need or invent data it does need as we're enlarging or shrinking our photos. If we tell it to not resample this and then adjust the resolution, it's just going to say, all right, I have all of these pixels. If you make the resolution higher, I'm just going to print it smaller so I can fit all of these individual dots of color on a page. So you could bump this resolution up to possibly 300 pixels per inch, and then it will be a reasonable print size. So this is one way we can check our image's resolution and then make some adjustments to it as well. Next, I want to talk about alignment details because our alignment details are important as well. Let's take a look at the examples I have up here on the screen. We take a close look and compare the one on the left to the one on the right, especially if you take a close look at the one on the left, you'll notice that it looks like somebody laid things out on our page and then shuffled them around and then said, oh, well, this is good. People will notice alignment in our poster. They won't necessarily notice good alignment, but they will notice bad alignment. If I turn on all of these grid lines here, it's a lot more obvious, especially with these guidelines here that says, okay, nothing is really lined up properly in the example on the left. But the example on the right, everything is nice and neatly lined up and looks really good. So as I've mentioned, people won't necessarily notice good alignment, but they will notice bad alignment. So keep that in mind as you're putting together your poster. Next, I'm going to talk about some design tips. Now that we've got an understanding of some principles that we can use to design our posters, now let's explore these design tips and also some considerations you'll want to keep in mind as you're designing your poster. So let's start out with these additional tips. First off, our posters should read from top left to bottom right. It's the most straightforward direction to lead your reader through the page, from left to right, top to bottom. You'll want to avoid arranging your poster contents in a non-standard way. So for example, one poster that I had designed as part of a class in graduate school actually had important page elements all around the outside of my outside of the page that we had a piece of information here in one corner, another piece of information on another corner, another piece of information here, and another there. There wasn't a clear direction as to where people should be going with each piece of information, what the natural progression was of where they should be going. And so that can be a little confusing. So make sure that you're leading people through your page in a consistent manner, top left to bottom right. Additionally, if you're including graphs and other data visualizations in your poster, first off, any graphs you include, you'll want to make sure that you include a title for that graph. That title is going to make sure that people understand what you're trying to show them, and also make sure that your axes are labeled properly as well. Again, this is going to help tie the content into your poster, help it more clearly tell the story of what you're trying to communicate to people. And we'll say, oh, hey, this is how this data ties into our text of our poster. So again, you want to make sure that all your graphs are labeled appropriately if you're including those kind of data visualizations in your poster. And for any images that you're including, make sure that you include a caption for the image or a brief citation regarding who created the image to give them credit. Additionally, those captions will help tie those images into the story and indicate why you're including them in your poster. So if, say, for example, you have a photo of a computer lab in your poster, including a caption will indicate that this isn't just some random computer lab that you've taken a picture of, that you've pulled off the internet. This is a lab that your team helped design, and other things that might relate to that specific picture, and tie it in with your poster. Next, I'm going to talk about some design considerations for digital posters or posters you're presenting online. Now, the most important thing to keep in mind is screen size. Not everybody is going to be viewing your presentation on the same size screen. There are a wide variety of screen sizes out there. For example, I am currently presenting this session on a 28-inch widescreen, 28-inch HD monitor. But if I'm jumping into one of the SIGUCCS sessions that's after my work hours, I might be watching on my cell phone, which is not as big as a 28-inch monitor. Or I could be watching on my tablet, which also is not quite as big as your typical computer screen. So you want to make sure that your poster can be read on a wide variety of devices. Depending on how your poster is going to be presented, if you are, for example, there may be some poster sessions that might be out there where people are just providing a PDF of their poster that you are just looking through on your own, just at your own convenience. People might be able to zoom in and out of that poster as they're looking at it. But if you're presenting in Zoom, or for example, for the upcoming SIGUCCS conference, if you are recording your presentation and possibly using your poster as a backdrop or including it as a visual in your recording, you want to make sure that at least that elements are visible as you are presenting. So you want to make sure that the important information like your titles and subheads and graphics are visible on even a small screen. And it's a good idea to make sure your text is a little bit larger than it might normally be for a printed poster. So when I shared that the font sizes earlier on in today's presentation, it included a range of font sizes. You might want to stick to the higher end of that range to make sure page elements are a little bit more easily readable. Working with a lower word count can also help make a poster work better on a wider range of screens, because then you have the flexibility of making your font larger and making it easier to read. Additionally, another thing that I want to keep in mind is, we've already got our screen size we've talked about, you also want to make sure you don't forget about the possibility of printing your poster. So if you are designing a poster for a digital presentation doesn't necessarily mean it's only going to be digital. It doesn't mean that, say, when we are all able to meet again in person and you are all able, if you've designed a poster, say you've designed a poster for an online poster competition or another online conference, and you might say, hey, I want to bring that to the SIGUCCS conference in 2022 in San Diego. If you've designed it for digital use and didn't really think about what size you were making it as you were assembling it, you're going to have some work to do to make it print ready. So I would suggest, even if you're going to, even if you know right now that it is going to be presented as part of something online, as an online conference or an online poster session, build it as if you were designing it for print. There's nothing that, it's not going to take anything away from your poster if you make sure that your poster is the proper print size. So I would suggest when setting your poster up, make sure that the size is a common poster size, like 36 by 48 is a good size to start with, because again, you never know if you're going to want to print it. And again, because of this, there's this point that I just talked about. You also want to ensure your images are high quality. As I've mentioned previously, even if you can't tell the difference between a high quality and low quality images on your screen. And last but not least, exercising restraint when it comes to the amount of text you include on your poster. As I've said, the print poster suggested word count is between 600 and 800 words, but fewer is better for digital because, again, we don't want to overwhelm our viewers. I have seen some presentations as part of digital conferences where somebody has put together even just a PowerPoint slide, which is packed with visualizations and information. And while I might be able to pick out most of that on my big giant screen here, if somebody's watching it on something the size of my secondary screen, which is a 15-inch portable monitor, or on my cell phone, I wouldn't be able to pick any of that out on my cell phone. So again, you want to exercise restraint as you're building your poster. Some other design considerations you want to think about is, how is your poster going to be presented? Is it over Zoom? Is it going to be as a PDF with a pre-recorded video? Well, if you'll be presenting over Zoom and sharing your screen with your poster displaying, you may want to go with a simpler poster design like this example here that I presented at the 2019 SIGUCCS conference in New Orleans. This one, I think, would work out, this type of layout would work out really well in a Zoom presentation because we've got our big title right here. We have the points we're making here easily seen in large text. There's not a lot of text in the poster at all, and it's easy to read. I can see this, and on my screen, it's not taking up my entire screen here at all. I can easily read through the text. I can see some of the graphics here, and then there's a link for people to learn more about the project if they want to go learn more about it. Now, if you're going to be pre-recording a presentation that will accompany a PDF version of your poster, you might want to stick with a more traditional poster layout. That's another idea that you can work with. Or even a somewhat more adventurous layout if you want. One of the more adventurous layouts that I've worked with, let me pull it out. For those of you who were not actually at the SIGUCCS conference in 2019, I actually went and did something completely off the wall for one of my poster layouts. This one is just, I included my text as a recipe when I'm talking about how to develop technology training videos. And then it is part of a recipe book that's just laying out on a counter somewhere. So you might want to be a little bit more adventurous with your poster layout if you're recording a presentation that goes along with your poster. So you'll still want to be conscious of the fact that people will be viewing your poster on a screen and design accordingly. So that's something to keep in mind. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about things you'll want to be aware of when building your poster, what programs you might want to use, and what you want to be aware of when you start building your poster. Now, there are three main programs that are often used for designing research posters. I'll talk a little bit about each of them right now. First off is PowerPoint. PowerPoint is the one that is most often used for designing research posters, especially for people who don't consider themselves necessarily as designers. It's easy to use, especially if you've been using it to create presentations for, for stand-up at a podium presentations. However, it can also be tricky to build a poster in, even though you know how to use it for presentations, because PowerPoint wasn't really made for designing print layouts. I mean, I've used it myself in situations where I did not have access to InDesign to design a poster or a print document. But it's not made for print. It's made for putting together a presentation that's going to be shown on a big screen. So it can get tricky to use for poster creation at times. For example, you can't wrap text around an image in PowerPoint. You have to make text blocks that then make it look like it's wrapping around an image in PowerPoint. So that's one of the many things that you might need to think about when working with a poster in PowerPoint. The next one I'm going to talk about is Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator is another program that's often used for poster design. Now, if you've never used one of the Adobe Creative Cloud design programs, but want some more options than what PowerPoint offers, such as the ability to wrap text around images or create a text box that contains columns. You also have to manually make columns in PowerPoint. There is no add 2 columns of text to a text box in PowerPoint. Illustrator may be a good place for you to start. Also, if you have just some experience with other Adobe programs but haven't used Illustrator, it's got a slightly lower learning curve than, say, its bigger brother, InDesign. InDesign is, if you're comfortable with Adobe's design programs or if you've got some experience with print layout, I would highly suggest that you use InDesign. InDesign is made for projects like this, for creating a research poster, as well as brochures and books and other print layout projects. It's specifically geared towards having many options for laying out text and images on a page together, and you have so much control over how things are put together, and you have the ability to tweak things to your heart's delight to make things look exactly the way you want. Now, the IT training course, Creating Research Posters, which I will actually bring up here on my screen, if I can get it off of the lower screen here. So this course gives us, if I scroll down here, we have extensive instructions on how to create your poster in each of these programs. So I'll just give you a quick introduction for the content for just how to create a poster in PowerPoint. If we scroll through here, this gives you guidelines about what PowerPoint doesn't really do when creating a poster, and some of the things that it does do. For example, you can import a chart or a graph that you made in Excel directly into PowerPoint, which can be handy. But it walks you through setting up the poster file, including the specific size that you need for your poster. It walks you through turning on guides and grids to help you make sure that your content is aligned. And each section, not just for PowerPoint, but for Illustrator and InDesign, we have videos and text that walk you through adding text to a poster, styling your text, adding images, and then also information on preparing your poster for printing. So I am going to go ahead and paste this link into the chat. if I can make sure that everybody can see this, I am going to send this. Aha, there is no option to send to everyone in the session. That is okay. If you go to ittraining.iu.edu/explore topics/titles/crpos/index.html, that will bring you to this course. Or if you just go to IT Training's homepage and search creating research posters, it is the first resource on this list. So it will bring you to here. So if you can only remember ittraining.iu.edu and creating research posters, then you should be able to get to this course easily. And I do believe, hopefully we can make sure that this link is available to everybody if you want to go through this content later. But in this course, as I showed, we've got extensive information on how to add images, add text, and then export your poster for print. Now, as I've mentioned, as I just said with print, this course is mainly focused towards putting together posters for print, because this was written in the before times, as a number of my colleagues have been joking, before COVID. But all of the design tips, all of the instructions are valid whether you're putting together a poster for digital use or for print purposes. So you can always check out the Creating Research Posters course at any time to learn more about how to create a research poster. And that course is free, and there are no due dates or anything for that course. Just come in and learn as you need to. So the big important thing that I want to point out is when you're putting together your poster, you want to make sure that it is the right size as you're designing, even if you only think it's going to be shown on a screen. And the two ways you want to focus on this in PowerPoint, for example, you'll want to make sure that you're on the Design tab in the ribbon and look for the Slide Size button. And then you can click on that, and then it'll give you the option for custom slide size. Then you just enter in your slide size and click OK. It may pop up a dialog box that asking you, do you want to scale down your content or adjust the size of your, I think it's maximize size or ensure fit. There will be two options. If you do this at the beginning of your poster creation process, before you've laid anything out on the page, either of those options are fine, because there won't be any content. So nothing will be scaled down or scaled up to make sure that it fits. Now in Illustrator and InDesign, you can actually set the poster size when you create a new document as part of that new document creation process. So you can indicate the size of your poster before you even actually have that visible on your screen, before you even start laying things out, before you hit create to create your new document. And so making sure that it's the proper size. And as I said previously, a common size for printing posters is 36 by 48 inches. If you start with that and then find out later at for a conference that you might want to present this at later, that it's a slightly different size, at least you can go in and adjust the page size later and then do some minor tweaks to things to make sure that your layout works well. It's better than designing a poster for 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and then having to scale everything up and hope that it looks good. So again, design for print, even if you're building a digital poster. And last, but certainly not least, we want to talk about what file type you want to export your complete poster as, so that way everybody has the best chance of seeing it. Because you might put together your poster in PowerPoint and think, okay, I can just share my PowerPoint file, right? Not quite. My suggestion is actually export your poster, no matter what program you're developing it in, as a PDF. There are many reasons you'll want to do this. First off, you don't need any specialized software to view a poster if you're saving it as a PDF. You can open it in, I think, just about all major web browsers. So if somebody decides to view it on a Chromebook, they'll be able to see it on their Chromebook because it will just open as a tab in Chrome. So you might often associate PDFs with Adobe Acrobat. As I said, though, you can open it in a browser. There are also other programs, like if they're viewing it on their cell phone, your cell phone likely has a PDF viewer built in that you can also open and view a poster in. Saving as a PDF also ensures that your fonts are going to appear as they should, no matter what type of device they're viewed on. I'm sure at some point you've designed a either a presentation in PowerPoint or maybe even a poster in PowerPoint that you've worked with, you've spent all this time selecting the right fonts to help get your message across, to help fit your theme. And then you open it up on another computer to present it or to print it. And those fonts aren't on that computer, and PowerPoint does its best guess at what the fonts should look like, and it does not do a very good guess at that. So if a font isn't installed on somebody else's computer, when they try to view your poster, it's not going to look quite right. So if you save your file as a PDF, it's ensuring that your text is going to look the way you need it to. It's going to ensure that your fonts are going to stay the same no matter what computer they're being viewed on. It also flattens your poster into one single file instead of multiple files. So say, for example, you put together your poster as an InDesign file. If you try to share this InDesign file with other people, you'll also need to make sure that you're including all of the images that you used in your poster, as well as possibly any fonts that you used, to make sure that it looks correct. When you save as a PDF, it flattens everything into one single file, one nice, neat package that you can then send just the one file to somebody, and everything will appear, as I said, as it should. And the final reason that you should save a poster as a PDF is if you decide to print it later, it ensures that your poster is going to print at the right size and look the way it should when it is printed. And so now here are some additional resources that will help you out as you prepare your poster for either the SIGUCCS conference or for any other poster sessions that you might be presenting at in the future. As I said previously, we have the Creating Research Posters course from IT Training available at the link underneath that listing there. And if you're interested in exploring print layout and design if you're interested in exploring print layout and design principles further, you can check out the course Page Design and Layout Basics. It goes into much more detail about the principles of page design and gives you more examples on how they would be used in a publication to help make things effective and engaging. So at this point, does anybody have any questions for me? We can open things up to questions. I will have Kevin do that, as he is our organizer for today and has a little bit more experience in GoToWebinar than I do. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free to let me know.
Looks like I do have one question here. Hold on a second. The question is, if we're creating a digital poster about a video, should we link to the video so people can view it, or just provide screenshots?
That's actually a very good question. You could actually do a little bit of both if you wanted to. So for example, if I go back to, well, this poster is not exactly the best example, but if I come into my audition poster here, so this one, I've got a screenshot of the course that I included. It's similar in that there's an actual asset that we're sharing, because this was a communication award winner. So I have a screenshot of the course itself that I had put into my poster, but then there's also a link to the course down at the bottom of the poster so people can view the course if they want to. So I might say you can use screenshots of the video as well as a link to it. So that way, if you want to refer to a specific point in the video, then talk about that, then you can include a screenshot from that specific section and then link to the video directly so people can view the whole video if they want to. So I hope that helps in the design department of putting together your poster on a video.
We got a thank you, so I think that answered it.
Wonderful. And for those of you who may be curious about these fabric research posters I keep pulling out of the pile behind me, my suggestion for any time you print a poster would be to print it on fabric, because it makes it so much easier to travel with. You can actually get fabric research posters printed from the website Spoonflower at spoonflower.com. Or if you want to learn more about how to make research posters on fabric, if you just do a Google search for Spoonflower research posters, it'll bring up the blog post that talks you through how to take your research poster and send it through Spoonflower to get it printed in fabric. It makes it so much easier to travel with. I can just bundle this up into a ball, stuff it in my carry-on, and bring it everywhere, and then they take up less space, and there's less chance you're going to leave your poster in airport security, like I did the first time I went to a SIGUCCS conference and had to run back and grab it. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. I would never have thought of that.
Yeah, and with research posters that you put on fabric, just about every conference that I've presented at will give you some sort of board to attach your poster to. So all you need to do with a fabric one is either have some tape or some binder clips and wrap it around that board, and then just clip it or tape it in place.
Wonderful. So we're actually coming up on time here, so I don't see any other questions or comments, but I personally want to say thank you so much, Beth, because that was hugely helpful. And I'm not just for poster presentations, but I'm also even thinking just some of the contrast and layout stuff that you gave us there will be really helpful for some just regular straight up PowerPoint presentations that I have to make in my life.
Yes. Oh, yes. A lot of this is also applicable to presentations of any sort, not just poster presentations.
All right, so I think we're going to call it there. We just hit the hour on the nose. So again, thank you everybody for attending. Do keep your eyes on the website for the link to this recorded presentation next week, and we look forward to seeing all of you, and you, Beth, of course, at the SIGUCCS conference online starting March 14th. So take care, everybody. Thank you very much.